Okay, you ready? I'd like to call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, I have adoption of agenda moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kenny, that Council approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Adoption of the minutes. Moved by Councillor DeRose, seconded by Councillor Sentence, that Council approve the minutes as presented from November 2nd, 2021. All those in any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Mayor's update. The Canadian flag was raised and relowered to half-mast for Remembrance Day, then returned to full mast. Moving forward, the Canadian flag will be lowered to half-mast annually on September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Once again, a special thank you to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 17 Thorold for hosting the annual Remembrance Day ceremony on November 11th at Memorial Park. This year marked the 100th anniversary of the Remembrance Poppy in Canada, our nation's symbol of remembrance, as well as the War Memorial, which was funded through the efforts of the Thorold Reed Band and unveiled in 1921. Councillors Wilson, Decker, Neal, Sentence, and Longo were in attendance. Thank you to all those that attended. It was very well attended, as well as those who turned in to the live stream provided by Thorold today. On Thursday, November 4th, the 5th annual Toolbox Project Niagara campaign was officially kicked off at the TCAG. Donation bins within the City of Thorold are located at City Hall, Public Works, our fire stations, the Post Office in Port Robinson, Club Belvedere, Karma Chameleon Gastropub, and Thorold Physiotherapy and Rehabilitation. This campaign runs until December 2nd, and volunteers will be putting packages together on December 5th at the TCAG, that's the Thorold Community Activities Group, for distribution to homeless and less fortunate men across Niagara. Thank you to James Simons and his volunteer group for spearheading this very important initiative. Councillor Sentence, Fire Chief Dixon, Regional Councillor Whalen, Dan Pelche, Crystal Riddell, and I joined James at the kickoff. The Great Holiday Food Drive will take place on Friday, December 10th, and the bus will be at the Pine Plaza between 1 and 1:30. There will also be food donation barrels at City Hall and Public Works until December 16th. This is Community Care's largest food drive of the year. Let's step up once again as a community, as we always do. Our Town and Gown Subcommittee continues to working effectively to deal with off-campus student issues in residential areas, particularly high-density areas like the Winterberry-Juneberry area. We meet weekly. Our last meeting was November 10th, and our next meeting will be tomorrow, November 17th. We are seeing improvements, especially over the past 2 weekends, and will continue to work with our community partners to monitor, patrol, and enforce infractions. On Monday, November 8th, CAO Manoj Dalwaria, City Clerk Joanne Hyde, and I met with Graham McGregor, Director of Strategy and Stakeholder Relations from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We discussed additional COVID-19 funding to offset our bylaw costs, as well as heads and beds levy funding. And we are looking at short-term and long-term solutions to this important issue. On Tuesday, November 9th, Councillor Neal and I attended the virtual One Thorold meeting. This group is very active and continues to work on many important initiatives. The upcoming Thorold Leaders Prayer Breakfast will be held on Tuesday, November 23rd from 7 to 8:30 a.m. at Club Capri. A virtual Zoom option is also available. This year's theme is Peace of the City. Please visit One Thorold Facebook page for more information and the Eventbrite link. Regarding Coyotes, please visit the City of Thorold website, thorold.ca, under the menu heading Living Here. Scroll down to Coyotes for important information, especially due to the recently reported concerns within the city. As well, during presentations this evening, we have Leslie Sampson, Executive Director, Coyote Watch Canada. Her presentation will provide excellent information, including best practices and action plans. Flu shots are now available across Niagara. Physicians and participating pharmacies are receiving the flu vaccine. Please contact them for details or to arrange an appointment. As well, the province is expanding the booster dose eligibility of the COVID-19 vaccine. Eligibility will expand gradually based on age and risk. Please visit the provincial website for further information and updates. A copy of the clarification correspondence for West Confederation property owners was posted on the City of Thorold website in the news section on Friday, November 12th. This is regarding the earlier letter to landlords that was sent out in error to some addresses that should not have received it. The Niagara region is requesting your feedback by completing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Community Online Survey, which closes on December 1st. They need your input to help make Niagara a more welcoming and inclusive community for everyone. Everyone in Niagara deserves to live in a community that is safe, welcoming, and free of discrimination. Please visit the Niagara Region website and Facebook page for more information and the survey link. The Thorold Amateur Athletic Association, the TAA, is hosting the annual Beaver Lock Farms Hockey Tournament this weekend, November 19th to 21st, at the Thorold Community Arenas. There are 4 divisions, under 11, under 13, under 15, and under 18. All divisions are full. Come out and support our Thorold teams and enjoy an exciting weekend of hockey. And worth noting, there is no entrance fee to get into the games. In closing, I'd like to say that Merrittville gives back presents, the Great Gift Giveaway. Lorraine and Don Speece want to formally invite all families to come out this Saturday, November 20th, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. for some holiday cheer. They will be providing a gift for approximately 5,000 children, 12 and under, and want you all to be part of it. As you know, they have a program called Merrittville Gives Back, and that is what they are doing. They are giving back to the drivers, crews, fans, and the community. Hot chocolate and coffee will be available from the Tim Hortons booth set up by the Merrittville wood-fired pizza oven. Then head down the hall for kids to meet Santa and receive a gift. They are extremely excited to see everyone, and this is an outstanding community initiative. And that's the end of my mayor's report. And now we'll move on to presentations, and we have Leslie Sampson, Executive Director from Coyote Watch Canada, here today to give us a presentation on coyotes and the issues we're having within the City of Thorold. And Leslie, are you there?
Oh, good evening, Mayor Ugolini. Can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome, Leslie. And thank you for coming to our council today.
Oh my God, thanks so much for having me. And on behalf of Coyote Watch Canada, it's an honor to be able to spend a brief but important segment tonight. So I'm going to try to share the screen, and just let me know, folks, if you can hear me and if you can see the entire screen, okay? Always a challenge. You do it for a practice run, and then you go to do the real thing, and it's not working. So I'm trying to share my screen, and it doesn't seem to be working. Let me see here.
Okay, we have the presentation.
Okay, okay, just let me know if you can see. Do you see it now or not?
No, we don't.
Okay. Let me try. Yes, I know you folks have it. Let me just try one more thing and then
Yeah?
maybe we can get it going. Okay, is it showing now?
Nothing yet, Leslie.
Hmm.
There we go.
Is it working now?
Well, it switched to, there, it switched, yeah.
Is it showing now?
Yeah, but if you can make it full screen instead of all the other icons,
Can you see the full screen now?
yeah, there we go. Now we're,
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. Now, I'm covering quite a bit tonight, and I know that you had hopefully you had a little bit of a chance to look through the material before. I also provided Councillor Holman with resources, exemplars for community, and also relevant e-learning modules and research that you'll have access to later. And so I will be going through these slides pretty quickly, but you know, there's always opportunity later on to delve into that. So thank you so much. So essentially, Coyote Watch Canada, we are an all-volunteer ground level organization that collaborates not only with government agency, but we also do research. We do consultation across North America, even over into Israel for I deploy field trained canine response teams that conduct research, investigations, and do on the ground site visits for areas that are experiencing challenging coyote sightings and encounters. Many of our partners work first response in the community, which could be law enforcement, humane societies, animal control, SPC, anybody that would be dealing with canids in the community. And I'll use the word canids here, and that could be wolves, coyotes, and fox, but in our case, we're dealing with coyotes today. And so we work with our team of scientists, and we have advisory council, and we collaborate on many, many levels with multiple partners. And so one of our highlights that we provide as a resource in consultation and also action focus is our canine response team. We have trained canine response representatives that are able to go into the communities and help do the in-field investigations, provide reports back to stakeholders that are involved, and we also provide research opportunities. And so within that framework, we look at doing best practices, conflict resolution, also relationship building and training for first responders as well, whether it's law enforcement, animal control, animal services, anybody again that would be working first frontline with coyotes in the community. And we base our work on three key points: science, education, and coexistence. And so within our municipal wildlife strategy framework, we use four cornerstone approach: investigation, education, enforcement, and prevention. The enforcement aspect of what we do within the municipalities is really partnered with the trained and expert personnel in the community. So we would work hand in hand with bylaw or animal services with respect to you know, identifying problem areas and working towards mitigating those. And we look at coyotes as our ecothermometer. So when there's issues in the community, we are very often able to, within a few investigative site visits, to determine, what the key issues are. That's just a basic infographic to help you understand in terms of the size of coyotes. When you look at Labrador retrievers down to fox to cat, and then of course the larger canid, which is the wolf, which we don't have in Southern Ontario. And so in communities, especially meeting the challenge of coexisting with these exceptionally intelligent animals, it's important to understand who they are, what their biology is, how they function within an ecosystem, and what folks can do on a daily basis to make sure that they're wildlife proofing their properties, and also looking at what a municipality can do to help folks report and what they do with that information. The community understands that that information would be used to help determine where there has to be mitigative strategies put in place. And also including the media, ensuring that information that's filtered to community is based on facts and science. And so looking at a successful coexistence, everybody has to be engaged. And communities across North America that have coyotes living within their landscapes are faced with often the same issues and struggles. But once a coexistence program is put in place, it's a lot more efficient and effective and sustainable to address residents' concerns in areas that could be, mitigated through education and just direct wildlife proofing. And so the number one thing here is that everybody needs to be engaged. And we also encourage municipalities to enact and develop a feeding wildlife bylaw. And understanding the roles that eastern coyotes play in the community, oftentimes in the media, the focus is, the conflict and sensational issues, but they do serve an important ecological role as a keystone species. They consume copious amounts of rodents, and every community has rodents, whether it's mice, voles, or rats. And so they are actually essentially removing those species that carry zoonotic diseases as well. And they clean up dead animals. And there's a lot of other reasons that they're beneficial within a community for spiritual and cultural connections as well. And so I'm not going to get too much into this. You can delve into that that infographic later on. But what we have in Southern Ontario and across Ontario is the eastern coyote. And the eastern coyote has essentially Western coyote DNA with a small amount of remnant Algonquin wolf DNA. That hybridization happened over a century ago, but we only have one species here in Ontario, and it's the eastern coyote. It's often called coy wolf, brush wolf, but those aren't accurate terms. We follow the ministry guidelines as far as the scientific designation for this species. And so when we look at conflicts in communities, sometimes it's a bit of a learning curve for residents to understand that if they're feeding one species, they're essentially feeding all species. And if there is food within the community, it's important for members to understand those feeding connections and where those hot spots are, whether they're parks, trails, cemeteries, parking lots, and whether it's direct or indirect feeding. Coyotes respond very well and efficiently to food resources that are easy and that are provided on a regular basis, and they will come back over and over again to those locations. So it's really important to help residents understand what their role is in wildlife proofing and not providing those harmful handouts. And with coyotes, it's really paramount to establish and encourage safe and appropriate boundaries between citizens and wildlife. And so once we start seeing an uptick in coyotes in a particular neighborhood or area, we look at what the draws could be. And there's a lot of facilitating factors. It could be environmental, it could be as something as simple as food being provided. But the most important thing is to remember that coyote families maintain a home range. Unless they're dispersing from their family, they will be in the same area for their entire lifetime. And so when we see habitat loss or there's infrastructure change, that will impact how they're navigating within the community. And if they have lost green space, then they might now move into different areas looking for food. And that's when there can be an increase in encounters between people, pets, and coyotes. And so looking at public education campaigns is very important as well. So looking at a neighborhood, this photo, as you can see clearly, this coyote was actually coming every day, going past backyards. And when the investigation was conducted, there were countless examples and evidence of food being left out in the community. Once that food was removed and working with the homeowner, that coyote stopped coming after 3 days. So it's really important to look at those connections as well. And on top of it being harmful to provide these animals their, supplementary foods, they are very capable of providing for their own families. And so this is a great example of two young coyote juveniles being fed food at a cemetery. Um, every every aspect of that food there is not good for wildlife, but what happens in those situations is there's an inflation or an increase in wildlife at these feed sites. It artificially inflates prey species, which would then also keep animals like coyotes and fox and raccoons coming into a particular area. And we don't want to be feeding them food resources that aren't healthy as well. And so looking at community growth and urbanization and expansion, all of these will impact where and how coyotes navigate through the community. So if there's construction happening, they're going to go, choose a different way of travel, is where also they also teach their young how to navigate shapes very well. Coyotes utilize hydrocore. They're good at navigating. And so a couple of, I have 4 slides here that are directly speaking to some of the changes that are happening in the city of Thorold. There's so much growth happening. It's a absolutely wonderful community, and it's a great area for wildlife to be making a living there. And so upon investigation around Ormond Street area, there's a great deal of construction happening, and within the Beaver Dams Park as well. We know through our sighting reports there's been coyote activity in these areas. And so all of the land that's been moved around there also disperses rodents as well. So they'll be going into the more residential areas surrounding that. And so it's important to recognize those key issues as well. Some of a lot of garbage bins are left open. And so mesopredators like raccoons can climb inside and pull food out. Birds will actually go inside and do the same. Then you have rodents accessing household waste, and absolutely coyotes will come around those areas as well. One thing we did note as well, for garbage bins that are at a park, we did have several sightings coming in from this area, and Sullivan Park had multiple open bin garbage cans there, and there were some pretty tasty food items inside as well when I looked inside the bin. So a simple step for those would be to get, wildlife-proof bins on top, or at least have lids put on them to discourage animals from going and pulling the food out. One of the most really, I think, amazing growth is around the Beaver Dam Road area. We also received sighting reports from there. So there's significant growth happening in the world, and I mean it's amazing. But also with that comes, infrastructure does influence how and where coyotes are navigating and where they'll end up making their territory. And so these areas here would be a great location for future education, literature, and just public awareness campaigns. And so for coyote biology and ecology, I'm just going to mention one thing on this slide is that coyotes do mate for life, and you most often will have the same coyotes living within a territory, and they co-parent. So both mom and dad will be raising the pups in a den. And oftentimes we can locate dens after the mom has moved the pups out. After about 5 to 6 weeks, they're going to be moving outside of the den. And so these areas are also could be areas of conflict for animals, pets and coyotes as well. And they are adaptive omnivores, so they will utilize any food source that is within the community, from fish to nuts to fruit to dead animals. And so, helping residents understand what types of food are attracting these animals is important as well. One of the methods that we use in the field to reach coyote behavior, if they're in an area or they've been fed by people, we do what is called aversion conditioning. We also have a published paper that addresses this a little bit more in depth. I provided that for Counselor Holman as well. This is essentially gestures and actions that send a very strong message to coyotes that they need to leave an area. And it can be something as simple as a voice, but other times you might have to use something a little bit more assertive. But it has to be partnered with identifying attractants and removing food, and part of an overall coexistence program. And if you note the top of this slide, you'll see Officer Lamb actually doing the green garbage bag method. And that has worked with families of coyotes, 4 adults, 9 pups, 6 coyotes. This methodology is very easy and folks can learn how to do it. And it's very easy with just a single coyote. And so the list there, keeping coyotes away, we also have a pamphlet that goes along with that to help residents have more empowerment and understanding what they can do to move away from being afraid of running into a coyote on a trail system, or also deterring them from a backyard. And so one of the things we do, and I wanted to mention tonight as well, is we do not endorse, using aversion conditioning with a family of coyote. That's the mom with 5 pups during denning season, just because of the fact that they were very protective around their young. It can be an issue, especially dogs. And so the takeaway here for coyotes are just another predator. A dog's a competition for food. They're also could be perceived as a threat or a danger to the ones. And so using a leash is really important, not only for the family dog as well. It can be very risky having dogs in wildlife. The end, just to reemphasize that knowledge and education and science is so much and important for a community to move these challenges. And the coyote that lives in the wilds of our minds is not North America. Our misplaced fear, embroidery, indifference, and imaginings is the most perilous presence out there. So the best thing that we can do as community together is to embrace these animals. They aren't going anywhere. We can't trap our way out of conflict, that is for sure. It's done for 100 years and it's never worked. but having the education and the engagement with multiple stakeholders is really one of the most sustainable and proactive things that can happen for a community. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Leslie, if you can take your PowerPoint off, then we'll get back to gallery view and we'll get at questions. This is limited to questions for counselors, any counselors that have questions. And I just want to state that that's PowerPoint is on our website under the Coyote, under the Coyotes link. This PowerPoint presentation that you see today has been put on our website. So I had a hand up, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. For you to Leslie, thank you very much for the presentation. So a question to you would be, the people on, I think 61 Ormond there at the affordable housing unit have had a coyote that they feel has been aggressive. What are their options? What should they do? What can be done? Can you guys come in and do the aversion, or is it all up to them?
Gosh, through Mayor Ugumini, thank you, Councillor, for that great question. We would absolutely meet with the folks there. We'd help. We would obviously do a site visit. And when we go into a community and we are engaging with residents, it's very open and very, there's no judgment. We're there to help them identify what the steps are that they can take. Taking those issues and make something as simple as maybe folks sitting outside at a picnic table and eating and having a cigarette, and then the garbage bin is left open. Coyotes are very exploratory and creative in how they find food, so they're going to find that location. So we would help, first of all, identify what simple steps can be done, even if it means the lid on the garbage bin is put down. And then also talk with the folks. We can show them different methodologies that they would be able to go out and feel really good about doing the bag method. And it's pretty credible. We have a video actually of a woman with a broken toe and a bum knee doing aversion conditioning, but she's using the method. And 3 adult coyotes and 5 pups are dispersing, and there is humor to it, but the point being is that people need to feel empowered and not afraid. If they want to go outside their backyard, there's ways that we can prepare them and safe and feel good and knowledgeable what to do.
Thank you. I'll let them know.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Leslie, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation, very informative. There's been a lot of sightings in the area. I do have a problem with some residents, including my sister, who they like to feed the birds, they like to feed the stray cats. Is there anything we can say to these people to convince them, or they're just not getting it?
Yes, through Mayor Ugumini. Thank you, such Councillor. That look, and I didn't mention it, but through the investigations, I've been the community 7 times already, different times in the day and night. There is feeding of cats going on porches, and coyotes love cat food. They'll come around to the porches to eat the cat food. And if the cat food isn't out, then they're going to take that behavior, that food conditioning, and go to other porches, whether people have the cat food or not. So it can be an interesting process, but I think if there is a feral cat program that is in place, working with trap, neuter, return organizations, and also helping folks understand you can't feed the wildlife. Feeding birds, they don't need our help, and especially squirrels. They're a food source for coyotes. Bird feeders that are overflowing and all the seeds on the ground, It attracts rodents, and every community has rats. We have them in Niagara. And once you start building or shifting, or there's culverts that are put in place, those rats go into the residential areas. So once Coyote figures out that one porch has some cat food, and then down the way somebody else is putting bread out, they're not necessarily going to eat the bread, which they will eat bread, but they'll go after those small rodents that go there. So we have a great quick tips for wildlife proofing property that goes through the steps and why it's important that you're not providing the food. And it's a huge shift for people. They have good intentions, but we know that the conflict arises. And we also have had reports that people are deliberately feeding this one coyote that we know of in Thorold that was down near Chapel, north and south areas. So you have folks that don't want them around, then you have other folks that feed. So it's bringing the community together to understand that they're not helping. Okay.
Thank you, Leslie. Go ahead, Councillor Drones.
Thank you, Leslie. Leslie, just one more question. So you're local, where are you located? And can we just call you upon need? Thank you.
Thank you, through Mayor Ugolini. Yeah, we have canine response teams across Ontario and throughout Canada, but the most sought after canine response team is in this area. And I have a team of volunteers that would come on site. And so I know that Councillor Holman and myself, we've had, when I first reached out to him, after he sent us a message, we are here for community. I run the program for the City of Niagara Falls, but we're engaged across Southern Ontario with Toronto, Oshawa, Oakville, Burlington, Collingwood. We're pretty much around. So yeah, we're available for sure.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions? Seeing none, Leslie, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for this very educational presentation. And again, I want to let you know that we have put this on our city website. And I want to thank you with your work with Jeff Holman, our Director of Public Works and Community Services. So we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Mayor Ugolini and council folks. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Have a good night.
Okay. Up next, I have motions for council support. City of Thorold, Councillor Hanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the City of Thorold, excuse me, let me just go to the top here. Whereas the City of Thorold 2022 budget deliberations will commence in the coming months, and whereas the City of Thorold will be committed financially to the Canada Games facility by contract. I believe now that date's changed. I believe it was going to be the 26th, but from what I understand, I don't have a date. I believe it's now in January, maybe. Whereas December 2019, no financial operating plan structure has been presented to Council for the Canada Games commitment, and whereas staff be directed to present a 5-year plan for the Canada Games facility and payment structure, and whereas the 5-year plan be presented for Council consideration before budget deliberations, and whereas a 5-year plan include estimate cost, tax increase to finance, operate the Canada Games facility, and therefore be resolved that the Council for the City of Thorold hereby requests all budget information as requested be presented to Council for future consideration on or about January 2022. I was requesting this, Mr. Mayor, in that, it's been a long, tedious process. We're into it 2 years now. We've seen no operational model in front of us yet. We've seen no financial plan. A spreadsheet, basically that's all that we've been presented with. And I believe that, we do, when we get our budget and that stuff, there's 5-year capital project forecasts, and there we do projected costs for a lot of projects and that stuff, and how we're going to do it over a numerous amount of years. And I want this motion because we're going to need it for our budget deliberations. And it's the first of many years we're gonna be committed, and we need to know how future councilors are gonna be able to handle it, or what decisions have to be made, and how we're gonna realign the city as far as its financial structure.
Thank
So I
you.
think it's important information to ask for. That's all I'm doing.
Thank
I've
you.
been asking for 2 years, and I put it in the budget now, so that during budget deliberations, we can know what we're looking at. That's
Thank
all
you.
I'm asking for, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Is there any further speakers? I just want to say that, as you're aware, the Director of Finance has provided a detailed response to your motion and copied all council. Staff has no further information. Any budget-related questions will be answered during budget deliberations in an open and transparent manner, and will provide information as it becomes available. And I was, the city clerk supplied me with that, and is there anyone that wants to speak further? Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First of all, we will not be councillors at the end of next November. Some of us may come back. So 5-year plan, as far as an operations plan is concerned, we cannot do it. We're not going to saddle the next council with the numbers that we might want to put forward. So the 1-year plan, I would agree with. I think we will have it, and I believe staff are working and will work with it and bring it forward at the same time as the rest of the budget, because I don't want to do anything in isolation. And that's so I agree that we should have a plan for this coming year as far as the costs are concerned, and that I'm looking forward from staff to bring that forward at the proper time. And that's so we cannot do a 5-year plan from my perspective. You might want to be able to do that, but from my perspective, you can't do a 5-year plan. A 1-year plan, of course, should be done, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Anyone else? Seeing none, well, go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to get into an argument about it, but I do believe we need a longer-term plan. This project has some larger than standard inflation increases based into it, and I believe we need to know whether or not some councillors have planned not to come back. I think councillors that may want to come back, or just the general public needs to know where we stand on this project. So I don't see what the big issue is. We will probably have other items in the upcoming budget that are 5 and 10-year forecasts, and I think that's all Councillor Hanley is looking for, forecasts just to show where we're going with it. So again, I don't want to get into a big discussion on it, but there are a lot of numbers that we should know, and other people actually want to know too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor Sentence. Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was looking at it and the email that was sent to us, all of us earlier that you read, and I think staff is taking care of this. I don't see why we need this at this particular time. I think it will come to budget, and I think it will be all transparent, and all the numbers will be out there as they have been. So that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Hanley and Longo. We've got some big expenses coming up, new fire hall, operations center, the list goes on. I think it's important to look ahead and know what we're dealing with. We may have to not proceed with some projects. So I think you're just closing your eyes if you say we don't need a 5-year forecast. That's the minimum we should have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Maria, or maybe I'm just wondering if she wants to make a comment on if she thinks this is unreasonable. Like, I did read the email, but is this difficult to do? I mean, I agree we need the numbers. I don't know if she can give a 5-year forecast at this point. I don't know. I didn't think that we had to make a motion about it. I'm assuming it's coming to us anyhow, but maybe Maria can comment publicly about it. That would be great.
Is Maria on? Maria, you're muted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as I noted in the email, the information that we have right now is the PWC pro forma. That's been on the website. It was provided to council back in November of 2019. So, you know, it's a little, I guess, concerning when we hear that staff haven't provided any numbers when the numbers are there. In terms of the 5-year forecast, the other thing that I've noted is that as part of the RFP for the independent operator, they were asked to review the pro forma and come up with a financial plan. These are experts in the field. They may see something different than the PWC pro forma. It would be premature at this point to come up with a 5-year plan when the PWC numbers may differ from what the independent operator can do. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
No, just that I can see, no, my concern is we got a 38-year long-term lease here, and it seems like we're only gonna tackle it 1 year at a time. If we have the numbers as in the report, you know, my numbers may be that it's gonna cost us $90 million over 38 years, but that may change. So that's my concern. It's gonna be every year, just, we're gonna guess or wait till that year. I've seen numerous projects and capital projects we've done in the past, and we've laid out how we're gonna pay for it over a 20-year period, how we're gonna pay for the fire on Highway 20. I know it may be different, but it's a capital project.
Well, thank you.
We have to
Go
come
ahead,
up with money.
Director of Finance.
Through Mr. Mayor, if you have a look at the spreadsheet, it does actually have the financial plan for the payback of the debt servicing. So no different than any other capital project that we're doing, debt servicing or internal financing, that was part of the spreadsheet.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Durham.
I just want to make a comment. My biggest concern is that since 2019, due to COVID and inflation, I can't see how the numbers aren't going to be inflated. That's just my comment. I'm not an expert, but that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Okay, any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. So I did review that pro forma again, and I did see the debt servicing, or how we're paying for the amount that we're putting forward. And it doesn't make sense to me to support this and have staff, I would guess it's still not going to be concrete information if they don't have the numbers from, not the independent contractor, I'm probably not using the right terminology, but the person, the company that's going to be running the facility. So until we have that information, I'm confident that staff will bring it forward to us when they have it. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to say I'm glad to hear that a new budget will be put forward by the independent operator. Again, I only learn these things in council meetings rather than getting updates. It's a very big project, big commitment, and again, to find out a new budget may be being tabulated now, that's good news, I guess, because once that's tabulated, then we'll have a better idea where we stand. So I look forward to maybe an update on how things are going with the selection of an independent operator, and then how things are going with the budget that they formulate. Because again, I haven't heard any news on any of those subjects for quite some time.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. And I'm sure, Manoj, when you get the information, you can disseminate it to council, please. Okay, okay, we got a vote. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, we still have our meetings every second week. I have not received one call from any councillor asking me any particular questions. If they want to forward some questions to me before the next council meeting, either Jeff or myself can give some answers to some of the questions.
And I'm
no
sure
problem.
council will provide the update through the CAO. Okay? Okay, we're going to go to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Nella, I didn't. Hey,
I'm opposed.
she's opposed. Okay. So,
Thank you.
do you want to do it again, or did you get it all? Okay, that motion's defeated. Okay. Motion to receive and file minutes or adopt recommendations of council, committees, and boards. Minutes to review for information purposes. I have a mover, Councillor Decker, and a seconder, Councillor Wilson, that council receive and file the minutes of the committees of council, local boards as presented. Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, Town and Gown Committee, Darlene Ryan, Port Robinson Community Center, Heritage Thorold LACAC, and Thorold Public Library Board. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Delegations to report. I have Hannah Chung, RJ Burnside and Associates Limited, to speak on PWCS 2021-95, Port Robinson Eco Park Design, South Main Street Bridge. And I will turn this over to Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah. Welcome to City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors, for having us today. So my name is Hannah Chung, and I'm a landscape designer with RJ Burnside. So we recently completed a project with city staff for the Port Robinson Ecological Park and Bridge Conceptual Rendering Program. So I'm going to try to share my screen with you. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so again, I want to thank everyone, Mr. Mayor and members of council, for having us today and for providing us the opportunity for us to give our consultation services for this project. We were awarded this project on July 7th, 2021, and the scope of our award was to provide graphic renderings and lead public engagement meetings with the residents of Port Robinson. So our methodology, with support from city staff, was to provide 4 PIC meetings with the public on separate dates. And so on August 24th, we met with city staff at the main bridge to discuss the project's overview and how we would like to move forward. So our first PIC meeting was on September 14th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the community center. And during that meeting, we presented the board you see here, which shows the report findings from the McIntosh Perry reports that showed the existing site conditions, the location, the constraints, the topographic constraints, ecological findings, and archaeological findings. We also presented the current structural state of the bridge to the public, and we presented a conceptual plan for an ecological park with a playground for the residents to comment via comment sheet feedbacks or email. And then we presented a second PIC on September 18th from 10 a.m. to noon, where we met with the residents on the bridge itself. And this was a more informal meeting where we could talk with the residents one-on-one, get to know them, and get to know how they use the bridge. And the residents were able to point out areas of interest where they like to fish and ecological interests as well. And we were also able to note several safety and accessibility issues. So from these 2 PICs, we gathered all the comments and we developed 2 concept plans that we presented to city staff for review and approval before we presented it to the community on our 3rd PIC meeting, which was on October 20th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the fire hall. So these 2 conceptual plans represented the various comments that the public gave us. And so then they were able to give a final feedback of what they would prefer to see. And from there, we developed a conceptual master plan here, which reflects the main comment from the residents of Port Robertson, which is they wanted to keep the bridge or something similar to what the bridge is, because for them, this is a community hub. This is where they gather. This is where they fish. This is where they meet with neighbors. So it's not so much a bridge for them as it is a community space. So from that, we did further feedback and we presented this final concept to city staff again before we posted it onto the website for final review. And walking through this plan, the main comment was that they wanted to keep the bridge with the exact same dimensions, which is 75 meters length by 9 meters width, so that they can fish, they can gather, and not impede traffic. And then we also presented ecological enhancements such as turtle nesting mounds, because a lot of the residents voiced concerns of seeing turtles crossing River Street to nest on the other side. So our plans would show 3 nesting mounds that would encourage the turtles to nest on the wetland side. We also are providing barn swallow nesting boxes, because in the ecological reports, it was noted that the endangered barn swallows were nesting under the bridge. So they require a new home before construction starts. So that's why we're presenting with this barn swallow nesting box. And then a local ecologist mentioned that there are bat species that they've noted in the area, and they'd like to encourage that population. So we are proposing 2 bat boxes within the site to encourage their populations as well. And then based on further resident comments, they mentioned that this area is where they informally launch their kayaks. So they would like a more proper kayak launch deck, such as a model here, which is something similar that's been done in the city of Hamilton. And they would like an area where they could park their cars just so they can offload and load their kayaks. And the fire halls did mention that if they had access to the wetland via here, it'd be easier for water rescue. And then a further comment was, in this strip of area, residents noted that it's pretty bare and they would like to see more tree plantings to provide shade, and also maybe planted with wildflower seeds to encourage the monarch butterflies and other pollinator species within the area. And so our final rendering shows what the bridge could look like, which is we're keeping the existing 6 piers, but then we're placing a new slab on top, which would probably be made from steel, or probably steel, and then a railing that is safe, but then won't encourage climbing, because residents did note that their kids would try to climb the railings if they could. So these were all the comments that we received, and so I'd like to thank again for the mayor and city councils for having us. And if there's any comments or questions you'd like to ask.
Thank you, Hannah. If you can move that presentation off, and we'll get back to gallery view, and I'll open the floor for questions only. If you want to comment when we bring that forward, when we bring the motion forward, you can comment. But if you have questions for Hannah, by all means, ask them now. Okay, Councillor DeRose, go ahead. And then Councillor.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Hannah. That was a great presentation. Hannah, was it ever considered to try to repurpose the original bridge?
With the McIntosh report, there is an option for trying to repair the bridge, but then that's basically kicking the can down the road, because with this current state of the bridge, and because it is concrete and rebar, that you would have to almost yearly do a reassessment to see where it's failing and then repair every 5 to 10 years. Whereas with this concept plan, it would be just removing the top concrete slab and then reusing the 6 concrete piers and putting on a steel slab instead, which would probably extend the bridge life for 50 to 75 years.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I thought Councillor Hanley, did you have your hand up? You're muted, Councillor
I was
Hanley.
just gonna mention about, I know you're using the 6 piers, and obviously at the end, you're gonna use the bridge abutments on the end too, the existing ones.
If
to
they can be
support the bridge.
salvaged, yes, if they can be salvaged. So again, with the 6 piers, this is all predicated on, once that slab is removed, then the engineers can have a better look at the piers and their conditions. And hopefully they're in good enough condition that they just need a few little patches up, and then we can reuse them.
Okay, because at one time, if I could miss, I'll comment later. actually.
Okay, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just, everything is accessible, completely accessible, right? The boat, thank you.
Okay.
That was the main comment we received from residents, because a lot of people use walkers, or they have
Right.
wheelchairs or baby strollers. They'd like to make sure that everything is level so that they can access even the kayak deck. So the kayak launch that we showed is actually fully accessible. So people can raise the bar and they can lower themselves into their own kayaks.
Good job, thank you.
Any further questions? I got Councillor Longo. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question. We're assuming that the piers will be okay.
Yes.
It doesn't look like there's any pricing or any talk about it in the estimate. What happens if they need to be replaced? How much would that add to the cost? Is that known?
That pricing, I believe, is also in the Macintosh report of how much it would cost to just fully replace that bridge. But then again, all these cost estimates that we provided are very rough, because again, once we haven't gone into detailed designs yet. So I can't say definitively, but it would be an increase in cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I understand, I don't want to put you on the spot, but that would seem to me, being a non-engineer, to be quite costly to have to replace piers. We're at $4.5 million here already. Mm-hmm. Is there any estimate what 6 new piers would cost?
Well, if you were to replace their piers entirely, then you wouldn't necessarily need 6, because with steel frame bridges, they don't need as many supports at the bottom. So it would probably maybe be 2 or 3 piers.
Okay, but again, you don't want to, I guess you don't want to give a number, because, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just would hate to get halfway through the project and find out we're in a substantial overrun. But anyways, I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
I had a comment, but I don't think I'm allowed
You can
to
make comment when we put the report on the floor.
Okay, sorry.
Is there anyone else for questions? Seeing none, I thank you, Hannah, for your presentation, and thank you for all the work you've done on this design, and especially all the consultation that was done. That was excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of council.
And now I will move the report on the floor. I have a mover, Councillor Neal, and a seconder, Councillor Hanley. PWCS 2021-95, Port Robinson Eco Park Design, South Main Street Bridge, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation for this report is, 1, that council receive the report for information purposes, and 2, that funding for the capital improvements and in-kind operating costs be referred to the 2022 budget process for funding consideration.
Thank you, Jeff. And now I'll open the floor for questions for Director. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the people of Port Robinson for putting a lot of time and effort, and our staff for having 3 or 4 meetings regarding this particular issue. And that, but my one comment question might be, is do we need to have another meeting for the final go through, or was this what everybody wanted in Port Robinson?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think, Mr. Mayor, we've gone through a fairly comprehensive consultation process. There may be some issues that come up as we move into detailed design that we want to include the community in as we get closer. But I also have Curtis Dray and Sean Dunsmore, who are actively involved, that might be able to shed some light on it as well.
Go ahead, Sean. Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Our manager engineering, Sean Dunsmore. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Based on this being the final preliminary design for the project, we will now go through the process of doing some detailed design. And as the detailed design works out, we usually have 2 or 3 public information centers during that to tweak some of the details.
Thank you.
Okay, and we also have our manager, Curtis Dray, here as well of Community Services. So if anyone has questions, we got Jeff, Sean, and Curtis. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
No, just more or less comments. No, it was great to be out there. I went out there and, with the kayakers, actually, when we were there, one kayaker left, another one was coming that day we were there. It's an active part of the community. It always has been. It's great to see, that the work that's been put in it. It was a long process, and that I know that there is some heated discussions with some residents at one time, but I think at the end of the day, where we're headed, it's in the right direction, and staff did a great job presenting it, and I love the conceptual drawings the way it is, and just make credit for the piers and that stuff. The bridge is pretty stable and that stuff, and it's great to see that we're going to reuse the piers and the abutments at the end and try to utilize that bridge to the fullest without having to go to too much of expense, as Councillor Long was mentioning, and hopefully it'll work out for the better. But a great job overall.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Up next, we have PWCS 2021-105 Corporate Space Needs, and we have Steve Fulton from the Thorold Museum here to make a presentation, and I'd like to welcome Steve and welcome the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Council, for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight about the Thorold Museum. This evening, we've been given 10 minutes to speak and directed by the clerk's office to confine our remarks to the staff report prepared by the Director of Public Works and Community Services. There is much in this report we would like to challenge the accuracy of, question, and even take offense to. Far too much for us to respond in our 10 minutes this evening. For this reason, we would encourage council members to balance this report with a careful reading of the materials sent to you as individual elected representatives by the museum board. For tonight, all we can do is highlight a few points from this report, along with offering a few general observations. To begin with, we should emphasize how generally dismissive and misleading the report is in an overall characterization of the Lock 7 Museum. While, as the report notes, the collection is currently being stored in the basement and the back office, the museum did exist, as shown by the photographs supplied by us to council and attested to firsthand by over 20,000 visitors who passed through Lock 7 from 2015 onward. The fact that the museum is in its current state of disrepair is a direct consequence of and response to demands placed upon us by city staff. If city staff were to reference any of the collection management policies to be found online or resources of groups such as the Canadian Museum Association, they would realize that reducing our displays to a few heritage pictures at Lock 7 constitutes decoration and not a museum. A fundamental principle of collection stewardship is that it remain in the public domain. On a related point, the report notes how window tinting and imaging has been removed by city staff to reestablish the view of the canal as it was intended, given the collection had been moved into one of the offices on site. It was also noted by way of justifying this action that the imaging had become faded and damaged over time, presumably becoming unsightly. Council has been provided with photos of the images taken in the spring of 2021. They can judge for themselves how faded and unsightly the images have become. It should also be emphasized that the displays have been moved into the back office, not by choice, but of necessity, having been informed by Curtis Gray that the screening necessary for the protection of the display items to be removed. The screening was identified by us as a prerequisite to our moving into Lock 7, its installation being approved beforehand by city staff and paid for at a cost over $2,100 out of the seed money promised by the museum as part of the relocating from Chestnut Hall. In terms of financing, the report notes that the museum received over $49,000 over 3 years, beginning in 2015, while actually promised only $20,000 as a one-time grant. In fact, the museum was promised $60,000 in 3 equal yearly installments, yet ultimately only received just over $37,000 before the remaining funds were reallocated. Of that amount, several $1,000s actually went to the repair, restoration, and upgraded the building rather than being spent on the museum per se. For example, just over $10,000 was spent on replacing the south side door. It would no longer lock, the frame was rotted, and it allowed flooding into the museum. We also installed cameras, and at the city and tourism's instance, put in fire extinguishers, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors when the city said they were unnecessary, and installed lighting in the basement storage area. Far from being an extravagant drain upon city resources for much of our 50-year association with Thorold, the museum has languished in cramped, deteriorating buildings on community yearly grants from $500 to $1,000. The report at another point indicates that many of the items in the museum were stacked in piles on the floor and random artifacts displayed on walls and windows in the building. In response, we can assure council that none of the displays at Lock 7 were random or haphazard. Again, we refer you to the photographs provided. All displays were organized and labeled. The stacks alluded to on the floor refer to the archival material received from City Hall just prior to the onset of COVID. The museum was approached by the city clerk about receiving this material. The intention, because of the huge volume, was to store it off-site, but literally at the last moment. While it was being loaded on the truck by us and at our expense, we were told by the clerk it could not be removed from Lock 7. As a result, it had to be placed on skids in space until space could be created. COVID prevented this from happening. Initially, while at City Hall, we were told the serious consideration had been simply given to throwing the archival material in the garbage. In terms to other community partnerships, the space being offered by BioBelt was simply unusable under existing conditions for archival storage. This is not a case of us being unreasonable or ungrateful, but simply realistic. We would welcome having the Canadian Museum Association, the OHS, or another similar organization assess the site for suitability should our judgment about the site be questioned. We are simply exercising a proper duty of care as an incorporated museum. In addition, in our discussions with HOPA and BioBelt, no other possible sites were showcased within the facility. On another note, we did have a discussion with the Deputy Regional Clerk about using SafeStore. Besides costs and accessibility issues, only a fraction of our collection could be accommodated. It would involve signing an archival acquisition agreement with the region, involving a partial surrender of ownership of the collection. This would be unacceptable for a variety of reasons. And the clerk was to look into the specifics of such an agreement and get back to us. To this date, this has not happened. It has always been our intention from the beginning in wishing to appear before City Council to pose one question. Does Thorold want a museum? And if the answer is yes, then at this point, given the history of general city disinterest, neglect, and at times disrespect, we need to see certain absolute guarantees. Ownership or a secure long-term lease of a suitable building, financial and staff support. For such things as grant applications and meaningful incorporation in city strategic planning and partnerships. If any of this is not forthcoming, or the answer is simply no, then the museum is done. And the museum board is left with the inevitable task, in consultation with OHS, of potentially seeing and disposing of the collection. Before this happens, however, council needs to give serious consideration to this issue in a larger context. To begin with, the Thorold collection, as suggested in the OHS letter of support copied to councilors, is just not the property of Thorold. It is part of Ontario and Canada's collective history. Similarly, while the Thorold Museum technically owns the collection, as ratified by our incorporation through OHS in 2018, in a truer sense, we are merely its custodians, holding it in trust for the broader benefit. By extension, ethically and potentially legally, giving the museum a long and rocky association with the city and in the presence of city buildings, Thorold also has a tactful duty of care for the protection and promotion of the collection. As an incorporated museum, there are provincial, national, and international standards for the care and storage of this collection, which must be acknowledged. The final demise of the museum in Thorold will not come quietly, simply or painlessly. The time has come for council to either set a new positive direction for the museum with the resulting outgoing protection and promotion of this community heritage, or to simply ratify which has already been done, thus bringing 127 years of dedication and effort to a close. Tonight, it is your choice. Thank you for allowing me to present.
Thank you very much, Steve, for your presentation. And I'll open the floor to questions to Steve before we move on to the report. Are there any questions for Steve? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Steve. I totally understand the importance of cultural and historical significance of municipalities across Ontario and the need to tell these stories to relive the past, as it is important to our future generations. Are you able to share with us any quantified data? Because in your what you sent us today in email, I read over about 4 times, and the Ontario head, I can't remember his name because my city emails aren't working at this point. But he mentioned that the financial spin-off effect on municipal museums have with local economic development and the attraction of any new industry to the municipality. Can you, do you have any data on that just to bring forward? Because he said he recommended something near downtown.
Absolutely. I don't have any hard data that I can, I can read off of a document for you. I am involved with the Thorold Museum along with the genealogical community as well. And it has been shown time and time again that people are coming to connect. People want to connect to their roots, want to connect to their heritage, and they come to a community, they shop, they eat, they invest in that time into the community, which brings dollars in. And the last effort I was showing, the report that I was reading, that many communities are reaping thousands, if not tens of thousands worth of dollars, just for the simple fact of genealogical and heritage tourism and how it goes hand in hand.
Has the museum attempted to pursue funding opportunities from all levels of government that other municipal groups have accessed, such as community grant programs and initiatives?
We have started that process. One of the things that prohibits us from doing it is we don't at this point have our registered charity. And that has been brought up in a few meetings with staff as well. Having a permanent address also is a barrier to that because we're not really sure, where we're going to be, and they're going to be looking for that information as well.
Okay.
All right, Steve, is there a cost now to use Lock 7? Is the city charging you rent?
No. No.
Okay. Just a few more questions. I won't be long. I understand that some of these grants have specific eligibility criteria. However, there are programs available to this group that, in my opinion, should be explored after reading what you sent to us in the city's report, explored to assist you with your operation expenses and sustainability. You also state there's been a number of abortive attempts of discussion with the city for a formal lease agreement. Given your limited budget or lack of budget because the value has not been disclosed that I could see, what type of lease agreement are you expecting from the city in regard to a monetary standpoint?
That's a great question. And if I was to pull a number out of my hat, we're looking for some sort of long-term lease more than a year. We are all volunteers that manage this museum, and it's a lot of effort for volunteers to dedicate. And if we can't at least get a minimum of a 10-year lease in a building, there's why are we doing it?
Steve, have you ever presented a business plan to the city? Or a budget?
I have not. Randy Barnes, the president of the museum, has spoken to council back in 2015. But no, we haven't done in the last little while.
Okay, thank you. I just got one last comment. I'll conclude by saying that in my 3 years on council, I was a little disappointed as I've yet to see staff criticized in a manner. I would almost call it a rude manner. As a counselor, I don't appreciate the language used to depict staff. Staff does not assign money to groups, but council does. Thank you for allowing my comments and questions.
Any further questions for Steve? Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yes, as we know, and we'll probably be giving them more money next year. How about the Maplehurst? I know the city has leased that whole building to somebody, but do we have a right to any of the rooms or any of the areas at that place? Because we seem to be pumping money into it every year. It's a pretty large building with one family living in it. Is there any opportunity
Councillor
there?
Kenny, that's not a question for Steve. That's a question you can ask when the report comes on. You're asking questions to Steve regarding directly to his presentation. You can speak. You can ask that question, but wait for the report. I don't have a problem with the question. Just Okay. Go. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe to shorten this for tonight, and we'll listen to the report, is that maybe a question to Steve is that if we were to have staff and a couple of councillors sit down with the group to take a look at maybe even more options, and I know there's a couple of options that I have, but I won't bring them up tonight, is to keep on looking at places and even going back into the information center on a short-term basis. Would your group be willing to continue talking to staff and the council?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sentence.
No, we'll be able to comment when the report comes out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Questions right now. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Steve, I want to thank you for your presentation, and also thank you for the literature you sent out to all the councillors as well.
Thank you.
And now we're gonna put the PWCS 2021-105 corporate space needs, mover Councillor Kenny and a seconder Councillor Sentence. And I'll turn this over to Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that council requests the Director of Public Works and Community Services to report back at the next available council meeting on corporate space needs for the city of Thorold.
And now I'll open the floor if anyone has any questions or comments on that. Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Steve, are you still on?
No, Steve's gone.
He's gone?
It's Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my suggestion would be, along with what Councillor Neal said, is that we all sit down and find a way to, like, I agree with the report, find corporate space and everything, but sit down in the new year after budget, after Christmas and everything, and sit down in the new year together and come up with a plan and try and see if we can get the museum as a committee of council or on board with the city with clear defined lines. They run it, we don't run it or anything like that. And to try and find a way to bring them on board, because I think that gives them instant clout for them to be able to apply for leases and for grants and for everything, because they are now part of the city. Again, we don't want to run anybody and they don't want to be run, but I would like to sit down in the new year if possible, and I don't know if it's a motion or something we can just do, Jeff, and sit down and talk about them becoming part of the city finally, because not having a museum and calling a museum to me is just not an option.
Well, Councillor, I think it'd be more prudent to sit down with and have a meeting like Councillor Neal said, and then.
Yes, I agree.
And
I agree. But
with
the
everything
idea
out.
of them coming on board as a committee of council or looking at options like that.
Yeah. Jeff, do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, only to say, Mr. Mayor, that council's given us direction at the council meeting on September 7th to find a home for the museum. And this recommendation that's in this report is basically saying we have an obligation to all the special interest groups that are growing in our community, including office space for staff. And I think it's premature to put people into certain pockets, certain locations, without having a full understanding as to what we have out there. And so I think it's the direction that we currently have, and the recommendation in the staff report is along the lines of what Councillor Sentence is saying here. Let's work together on this and find a place that's going to be acceptable. And it may be a short-term, long-term type of solution, but it has to be in the best interest, and it has to be a longer-term vision that allows community interest groups like the museum to grow.
I agree.
And so that's really my only comment here. And other than to say, from a staff point of view, we're in violent agreement with you. We need to have a good hard look at these spaces.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Neal, did you want to speak next? And then I got
thank you
Councillor
very
Hanley.
much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with what everybody has said so far. I think in the short term, if maybe they just allowing 2 specific people to be allowed into the information center to make sure that what the Historical Society, the museum has there, to make sure it's in good shape and that type of thing, while we get a meeting together to explore. And I think we can come to a good solution on this. It may be a long-term solution and not a short-term solution, but I believe some of their pieces of equipment are still at Chestnut Hall. Maybe a question to Jeff, are they still at quick? And maybe if they want to, maybe we could allow them to put some more pieces of equipment in there in the short term, I'm calling it, so that it is inside and now not out in the elements, that type of thing. But I think we need to sit down with them and see if we can hammer something out.
So the question to Jeff is that, is it feasible for them to go in there? I guess, Jeff, is that a short-term feasibility to do that at this time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're undergoing condition assessments of all our infrastructure now as part of our asset management plan. And it'll help us understand what investments we have to make to bring those buildings up to a certain standard, or whether we should keep them or whether we should sell them, including, as Councillor Kenny mentioned, the Kiefer Mansion, a number of community centers. You have to kind of look at it holistically, but there may be some things that we want to do in the short term, some quick fixes, but we can't lose sight of the long-term plan as well.
So my question then, Jeff, just you say a next available council meeting, so we can expect a report back in a relatively short period of time?
Well, we have a lot of the work completed, Mr. Mayor. I think the information is just going to say, well, you know what, it's not just the museum folks, it's also the seniors and TCAG are working together on a collaborative plan. City staff needs, we're expanding. We need to look at office space and then compare that to where the inventory is. I'm not sure that we'll have a firm recommendation as to who goes where, but I think the council needs to have the whole picture in front of them to see where it makes sense to make a short-term plan, to make some small investments to move people in just to keep them in the game, and where we need to make some pretty hard long-term decisions that might cost us quite a bit of money. Thank you.
Councillor Kenny, are you good with the answer that the director gave regarding looking at all? Okay. Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just following up on what last question, Jeff, Councillor Neal said, can a couple of the members, Randy and Steve, gain access to Lock 7, just take a look and see what's going on in there with their stuff? Would that be a gesture, or just letting them in there to see what's going on? Just a couple of them.
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. I think everything's on the table.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good suggestion, Councillor Neal.
Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm a little concerned the direction this is taking. When I read the title of this, it led me to believe we're going to address the growing needs of staff space allotment. But to my surprise, I was wrong. I understand it's a combined report, but I have serious concerns with the implications in this report in regards to establishing even more encompassing partnerships with special interest groups. In my opinion, as staff is entrusted to the operational capacity of our growing city, we can provide the value of service that our citizens will require going forward. Once we establish the needs for growing staff and their space requirements, only then should we be having conversations for the needs and space requirements of special interest groups and or community groups, as staff will have to work with these organizations to make them sustainable and successful. What I need to explain to me is how do we maintain operational effectiveness if we're constantly subsidizing special interest groups and other outside agencies? I don't see how we're going to afford to keep everybody happy. The second floor now is being talked about to this TCAG for a wellness center that is being put in at the Brock Center, at the Brock Canada Summer Games. But I'll conclude. In conclusion, after reading about all the upcoming needs of our city in the second paragraph, new fire hall, new operations center, and the list goes on. We haven't started Broderick Road. It's Canada Summer Games facility expenses. Our priority should be to accommodate our internal needs first before accommodating the needs of special interest groups. Thank you.
Thank you. And the report will come back and address some of the concerns you have, I'm sure. And at that point in time, you can make further comment on it, Councillor Dwan. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Oh, Councillor Decker. Is Councillor Decker still there?
I was in favor. I keep putting my hand up. I'm not sure if you see it.
No, I didn't. Okay, but I do now. I heard you say yes. You're in favor. Thank you. Okay. Consent reports. I have a mover, Councillor Kenny, and a seconder, Councillor Neal, that council approve items 15A to 15K as presented. Are there any items that we want to pull here? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull F, the Beaver Dam Sanitary Pumping Station.
Okay.
And I, the Accountability and Transparency Update. And I think that's it.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I have a mover, Councillor Kenny, and a seconder, Councillor Neal, that we do items 15A to 15K with the exception of 15F, the Beaver Dam's pumping station, and 15I, accountability and transparency update. And I have a mover, Councillor Kenny, and a seconder, Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So now we'll go to the two reports that were pulled. And we'll start with PWCS 2021-97, Beaver Dam Sanitary Pumping Station Interim Contingency Plan. And again, I'll use the same mover, Councillor Kenny, and a seconder, Councillor Neal, and I'll turn this over to our Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that council approve the implementation of a contingency plan that would allow the development of properties located within the Beaver Dam sanitary drainage area to proceed while the Niagara region completes the necessary upgrades to the force main and sewage pumping station. And two, that each developer wishing to advance projects in this drainage area be required to provide a letter of credit in the amount of $75,000 per property to cover the cost of any emergency bypass pumping that might be required during extreme wet weather events.
Thank you. And now I'll turn that over because I know Councillor Longo, you pulled it, so I'll open the floor for you to comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this one just showed up today, so I only had one chance to read it. A little concerned, and maybe staff can alleviate my fears. The region, I guess, is behind on building this new sewer and pumping station. My concern is if there is flooding, I know people, the developers are going to put money aside to help with bypass pumping. But if I lived in the area, I would be extremely concerned at the risk of flooding. You know, we didn't let other developers move ahead with projects, I won't name who, until all flooding concerns were put aside, months and, I mean, years and years of reports. How can we be 100% assured that no residents in the area will be affected by basement flooding during this time frame?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there's no 100% guarantees. In fact, it could happen tomorrow. The idea here is that the project's going to take about 1.5 years to complete. So by the time they upgrade the wet well to pump station and replace the force main, they expect to be completed by the fall of 2023. During that period of time, there's a couple of developments that would like to go ahead. The pumping station can, on every day, handle dry weather flow conditions. That is, there's enough capacity in the current system to manage that. It's only during extreme wet weather events that there is a risk that the pumping station can't keep up. And that risk might happen once or twice a year or once or twice a decade. It's a risk that a lot of municipalities have been able to manage by setting up certain protocols with emergency, with pumping trucks to bypass the flows to help reduce the impact at the station so that none of the properties that are downstream are going to be impacted. And it takes a lot of coordination and a lot of cooperation between the Niagara Region city staff and the contractor that will be providing this work. And as their contracted services are required, we will pay them and invoice the developers back using the security to guarantee full refund. It's basically risk management that exists today that's being shifted to the city down to the development community if they want to move ahead. If we don't want to proceed, then these developments will be on hold for another 2 years. So it's a manageable risk, Councillor. There's no guarantees, but it's a way to allow the projects to move ahead with some of their underground servicing and construction that would take the better part of a year or year and a half to complete before anything gets done anyways. So I'll
Okay,
leave it at that.
I thank you for the answer, and I understand there's not a 100% guarantee. So can I just get a quick reasoning why we're in the position we're in? Why hasn't, like with all development, you have to make sure you have infrastructure in place. Why is the region or whoever's responsible behind until the fall of 2023 to have the proper services in place for the development? It seems like we're doing this the wrong way. We should have the services in place first and then have the development. Is there a reason why we're here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the difficulty with these projects is that you can never anticipate when development is going to want to connect. As much as they might go through the process of a rezoning or official plan amendment, plan of subdivision, we really don't know what their plans are to actually construct until you're at the subdivision agreement stage. There's a couple of projects that are of interest to the community. The nonprofit housing project located within Artisan Ridge is one of those that the council has expressed support for in the past. And those are the things that would be allowed to proceed if we accept this type of contingency plan. Otherwise, we're basically putting those projects on the shelf for a couple of years.
Okay. And a final question for you, Mr. Holman, and I appreciate your answers. If a resident in the area is affected, will they be made whole by the city or the developer without relying on their insurance company or anything of that nature?
So the contingency plan talks about dealing with the problem before it shows up or manifests itself at the individual residential level. We already have a program in place that allows people to put in backflow valves and sump pumps to provide additional support in the event of extreme wet weather flows. But the concept here is that when a high level alarm is received at the station, we will respond in appropriate fashion to make sure that there isn't any further surcharging in the system. I guess in an extreme situation, there could be potential impacts, and then that would have to be referred through our insurance company to resolve. But I believe that situation exists today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holman, I appreciate it.
Did you want to comment, Sean? I seen, did you have anything? You're good? Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Look, fellow councillors, we need this contingency plan to proceed with the build for the seniors, the 60-unit build on Beaver Dams. This was set up by our staff in conjunction with the region. That's what the letter was for, so that we can proceed with the build. So we need this passed by our group of councillors to continue with the build at Baker Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanley.
Can I ask, I know that's an example in the Rolling Meadows plan of subdivision, before he could proceed, he had to install CSO tanks, I believe, 2 at partial to his expense and partial to region expense. Why can't we be installing CSO tanks? Because the reasoning for Mr. Gordon not to do it was so that he could proceed for development until the future waste treatment plant was built, I think out on Brown Road where it's projected to be. And here we didn't allow him because I believe there the overflow that siphons under the canal, which is from 1936, I believe, is only operating at 40% capacity. And at the time he wanted to come to council and ask that that capacity be opened up so that possibly you could save him from having to build CSO tanks. And he wasn't given that opportunity. I believe he was responsible for helping to build 2. Why can't we install CSO tanks? If it's going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road? Is a possibility for dumping raw sewage there. That's the thing.
So, Sean's going to answer that. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you.
First of all, to build a CSO tank takes about 2 years. So there's no time advantage to it. What they're doing at the regional pumping station is essentially that. They're increasing the wet well and increasing the pumping capacity of that station to allow for the wet weather flow to flow through the station. Unlike the Rolling Meadows subdivision, where there was no opportunity for increase in that capacity of the pumping station at Peel Street. That's why the CSO tank had to be put in place, was to allow for the holding of the sewage until the pumping capacity of the station could catch up. So it's a slightly different situation, and what happened in Rolling Meadows was that there was already confirmed basement flooding in the area. At this point in time, we don't have any basement flooding in the Beaver Street pumping station area.
Beaver Dam, yeah. Okay.
In the Beaver Dams area, I appreciate the answer, Sean. We don't have any flooding because we haven't allowed the extra buildings to be built yet. So until then, whereas in Rolling Meadows, you're right, they already had flooding, so you had to build the pump. But again, the siphon going under the canal could increase that, and that was something that's never been done. So I appreciate your answer.
Okay, and I can tell you from a public works standpoint.
Development, obviously, we got to live with development. It's just the way we go about it. And I'd hate to be one to approve something and people's basements get flooded, but we'll take the staff report as that we have no concerns.
And I can just say from a regional perspective, because I sit on Public Works, that the pumping station upgrade and the force mains is in the budget. So anyway, okay, it's not a deferred item. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad Councillor Kenny brought that up. I didn't realize the nonprofit housing building would be affected. So that's good to hear. It sounds to me like the project will be moving forward before the fall of 23, Councillor Kenny. I don't know if you can say anything on that or not, but I certainly didn't want to bring this up to affect that.
At our last meeting, we think everything's going to be in place to start a build in the spring of next year.
That's great news. I hope somebody from your board can come forward and update us.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe we can get Serge to come to council. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. 15I, accountability and transparency update. And again, I'll use Councillor Kenny and a seconder, Councillor Neal, and I'll turn this over to our city clerk, Joanne Hyde. Go ahead, Joanne.
Through the mayor to members of council, the recommendation for this report is that council receive Clerk's Department Report Clerk 70-2021 for information.
Okay, and now, Councillor Longo, you pulled this report, so I'll let you go ahead with any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I understand greatly that this is a touchy subject, so I'll try to tiptoe through it if I could. I understand staff doesn't want to speak about this topic, so I don't know. I'll probably go through the CAO. Hopefully he can answer these questions. And and then we can be done with it. I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, through you to the CAO, has a formal complaint been undertaken with the Ombudsman's office, or?
And I'll let you answer that. Go ahead, Manoj.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. It is through our clerk's office that a formal complaint has been lodged against with the with the Ombudsman's office. Yes.
Right. So a formal complaint has been put in, but is it what's the wording? I looked on their website. Has it a formal investigation being undertaken by the Ombudsman office? Are they actually doing an investigation, or has a complaint just been put in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will defer it to our city clerk. City clerk's office is dealing with the Ombudsman's office. What is the state, where we are at? They can able to answer that. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Sure. Through the mayor to members of council, yes, an investigation has begun, and we're being notified through the Ombudsman's office that process is beginning.
Okay. So, and again, I'm going to just stick to the Ombudsman part of it because I want to understand what's happening, if I could. I went on their website. It says the Ombudsman office cannot investigate individuals, private businesses, the courts, politicians, local police, or the federal government. So what is being investigated?
Through the mayor to members of council, an investigation was requested and launched by the Office of the Ombudsman in 2006. They took over for the looking into as ombudsmans for the municipality. So what is being looked after is the Section 14 of the Ombudsman's Act with regards to the procedural and integrity of a decision-making process of council.
But what we're looking for here, from what I read in the report, is we want the Ombudsman to tell us that we're doing everything properly.
Through the mayor and members of council, the city staff will maintain confidentiality until the informal or formal investigation relating to the Canada Summer Games, and will refrain from providing comments publicly during these meetings.
So you didn't answer my question then. So that was done purposely?
Through the mayor to members of council, we will continue to remain confidentiality through this process.
Okay, so you're not answering my question, and I'm not even talking about the touchy subject. I'm just trying to understand procedure here, which I'm not the only one asking, other people are asking. And again, I understand it's a touchy subject, and I understand staff comes to work every day to just do their job, and I believe that's what they do. But I'm having a hard time understanding how the Ombudsman's office is coming to the city of Thorold, and they're going to tell us that we've done everything correct, because nobody's saying we've done anything wrong. So it's totally, again, I guess I'll call the Ombudsman's office, because I'm not sure what they're investigating. They're supposed to investigate wrongdoing, but there is no wrongdoing. Nobody's saying there's wrongdoing. What we're saying is everything was done properly. So I'm confused what's being investigated. But staff, I guess, doesn't want to answer it. So, and I respect you for that. So from here on out, we will never discuss Canada Games in open council, and I'll ask that to the CAO.
Manoj?
Through Mr. Mayor, my understanding is until the investigation is being undertaken formally and informally, staff will not be able to provide any information. However, just to add to that, staff has been delegated by council to undertake participate in this project. We will continue to move forward with that. We are attending meetings with our consortium partners and are engaged on it. And also, whatever information that we have as per council direction, we are posting it on our website so that everyone has access to that information. Thank you.
But there'll be no discussion in council. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO, are you considered staff, Mr. CAO, or will you be involved in discussion?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm
Since your
part of the
relationship with council is quite different.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm considered staff as well. Thank you.
Okay, so you will not be discussing this. Okay, that's fair. Just want to understand where we go from here. So if an item comes up at council that pertains to the Canada Summer Games, can council still discuss it without the presence of staff?
Through the mayor to members of council, council may discuss it, but at this time, like we said, staff will continue to work on the project as per council's direction. Any information that we have and will continue to receive will be shared on our website and with council at any time when budget related questions with regards to the project will be answered during budget deliberations.
I understand. So through you, Mr. Mayor, during a council meeting, if the topic does come up, then I take it that staff will disconnect their video and their audio from the meeting while council discusses it?
Through the mayor to members of council, an item doesn't come up to the council table unless it's brought forth by council to council by a staff report. So at this time, I don't believe that staff will be bringing forth a report unless it's absolutely necessary to provide council with an update.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, through you to the clerk, if I bring up a statement by councillors regarding Canada Summer Games, what would happen?
Through the mayor to members of council, staff will continue to remain throughout the process, and if there are any questions, staff will not be able to respond to them.
Okay, so in that circumstance, staff would stay in the meeting but not say anything.
Through the mayor to members of council, that's correct. However, you do need staff to be at the meeting in order for the meeting to be a legitimate and legal meeting of council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll just make a final comment, and then I'll let others speak if they choose to. You know, when I saw this report, I was a little, it's a little distressing that it's gotten to this point. I'm reading between the lines. Like I said earlier, I believe staff comes to work and they do their best job. I don't think staff has tried to influence our involvement with Canada Summer Games one way or the other, whether to be a partner or not to be a partner. I believe they did what council asked them to do. I believe that reading between the lines, it looks like staff doesn't want to be attached to this decision. And I have empathy with them because I'll be quite honest, I don't want to be attached with this decision, but the difference is staff will not speak about it and they have that right, but I will continue to speak about it as long as I'm a councillor in the city of Thorold. So that's all I'll say, and I'll respect the decision of staff not to speak on the subject. Oh, and one more question if I could. Does anybody know how long this investigation would take?
Clerk?
Through the mayor to members of council, in my experience, most investigations takes upward of about 6 months.
Okay, so this will be, well, I won't comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't even know what to say about this. I don't know if this has ever happened before. I don't agree with the reading between the lines that that staff doesn't want to be a part of this decision. I don't think they have any issue with that. I certainly don't have any issue of being a part of the council that made this decision to support the Canada Games. But I mean, obviously I don't want staff to feel unsafe, but I just think that going about it this way, in my opinion, isn't right. And I'm not that I take away from staff being able to go to the ombudsman and go through that process, that's fine. But for all the staff members not be able to speak to council about this project, the last stretch of this project, of which I support, it just is insanity to me. How are you going to bring this forward? I mean, you spoke about it this evening. Maria talked about the numbers, so I don't understand to the extent that is. And I'm just surprised that this is actually allowed to happen, because essentially as council, there's going to be decisions that are being made. We look to staff for recommendations and suggestions on what to do, and now we can't ask because you have to remain confidential. I don't think this is right. And I don't think this is fair to the city either, or to the whole process of the Canada Games, which I do support, but I also do want the proper information and to have questions to be able to be answered by council as we go through this, you know, and beginning in 2022, I can't imagine us not being able to ask questions, have advice and guidance from staff other than posting on a website. I'm not sure what we can do about this as council. So through you, Mr. Mayor, if we don't support this, does that mean anything? Like, is this just out of our hands as a council?
I'll let the clerk answer that.
Through the mayor to members of council, staff will continue to work on the project as per council's direction. Any information that does come will come through the budget process and will be done so in an open and transparent manner. It's just that staff will not be responding to any questions, because questions have been raised on social media that have negatively impacted city staff, including the questioning of the integrity of the process and discrediting staff through false information.
Is that clear?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I agree that those comments that have been made are definitely completely inappropriate, but if staff brings a report to council and we have questions about that report, this means that they cannot answer that?
Through the mayor to members of council, if staff brings forth a report to council, staff will be able to respond to those questions, but we will not comment on the process within the investigation.
So you will be able to...
I don't understand what that means.
So she's saying that if staff brings a report, you'll be able to ask questions on that report.
But if people are just randomly making comments about Canada Games, then they won't respond to that.
Through the mayor to members of council, if there are any reports that are coming forth to council and staff are bringing up those reports, the contents of the reports will be discussed. However, the general information that is being investigated will not be able to respond to.
So, are you clear with that, Councillor Wilson?
Well, sort of. So they will only respond to the report topic.
To the report.
But no additional comments. So.
No, the comments that are related to the investigation. They can respond to additional comments if it's not related to the, am I correct when I say that? I'll let the clerk clarify that.
Through the mayor to members of council, staff, when bringing forth a report, will be able to answer questions with regard to the content within the report.
Yeah, yes, I heard that part before. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I get that part, but I'm just, so if I ask questions and it's about this, I guess I'm just confused. I'll figure it out. Thanks.
Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO or the clerk, can the public ask questions related to the Canada Summer Games to staff?
Through the mayor to members of council, we will remain confidential throughout the process. Depending on what the questions are, we would always refer members of the public site with all the available information.
I'm sorry, you cut out there, Madam Clerk. Can you repeat the last part of that answer? It cut out.
Sure. Through the mayor to members of council, the last part of that is when there are questions from the public, we will be able to direct them to the website, which has all of the information made available.
Okay. Councillor? You're frozen. Okay. Councillor Hanley. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Myself too, in regards to the ombudsman and what can the ombudsman investigate and what he can investigate. You know, as Councillor Longo mentioned, when reading the ombudsman office, it states that he can investigate complaints about the Ontario government, ministries, corporations, agencies, boards, commissions, and tribunals, with some exceptions. The ombudsman can also investigate complaints about all of Ontario's municipalities. Complaints about the municipalities, because it's mentioned in the report about comments made by some council members, while the Ontario Ombudsman can investigate that. In fact, the Ontario Ombudsman cannot investigate individuals, private businesses, the courts, politicians, local police, or the federal government. So what are we trying to accomplish here also is that if there's complaints that have been forwarded, he won't receive complaints if there's been, as put in here about public perception. The ombudsman, that's not his duty as an ombudsman, so he won't investigate anything that has to do with that public perception. He's not going to investigate anything that any councillor here might have said because that's not part of his mandate. They don't investigate politicians. So what are we looking to accomplish here is that I'm quite, I'm abashed at myself and that stuff as to what we're trying to accomplish here. Other than not going to discuss the Canada Games, and I don't think it's going to be a 6-month process, because I've been looking at it, and some of them got down there that some of them take 20 months to do an investigation, and some of the ombudsman reports. So to be done in 6 months, being that we're just finished through COVID-19, and they take up to 20,000 complaints a year. If we can get this done in 6 months, and what is going to be accomplished, I'm not sure, but can I ask, if I could ask you, Mr. Mayor, if a file or complaint has been made, is there a file number that's attached with it? Could council be able to get that file number? Yes. So we could be able to monitor and see the progress that the investigation may be taken, or we will not be privy to that information?
I'll let the clerk answer that.
Through the mayor to members of council, a file number will be assigned, but during the process of the investigation, it is confidential, and council will receive updates as we receive updates, and the final report will be posted on the Ombudsman's website.
Okay, but as mentioned, I'm still confused because he can't investigate politicians. He can't investigate perceptions made by the public, because it's not his mandate. So what we're objective here is I'm totally confused.
Do you want to speak to that?
Other than silence.
Through the mayor to members of council, as indicated in the report, city staff submitted a request to the Ombudsman, who's an impartial officer of the Ontario Legislature, to ensure promotion of fairness and accountability. So staff want to assure both council and the public that the entire decision-making process undertaken by and directed to staff has been an open and transparent process while remaining accountable to the taxpayers. So a request to investigate the process was independent by an independent third party has been submitted to confirm the accountability and transparency that staff have followed through with the directions provided by council relating to this project. So for this request for the investigation, there will be no cost to the city of Thorold. But again, staff will continue to work on the project as per council's direction, and many questions have been raised on social media that have negatively impacted staff, including the questioning of the integrity and the discrediting of staff in the process by providing false information.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
I appreciate it, but again, they don't investigate individuals or politicians, so
anyway,
what they're going to accomplish, I don't know.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If you don't raise your hand, does not signal you're opposed to it? Because I see Councillor Wilson didn't raise her hand, or Councillor Longo didn't raise his hand. So there was me and Councillor DeRose, that's 2. If Councillor Wilson didn't raise his hand, that's taken as a nay. If Councillor Longo didn't raise his hand, that's taken as a nay. The vote would be 4-3.
Through the mayor to members of council, what that means is that a no vote is a vote in the negative, but because the report has no direction other than receive for information and the complaint has already been filed, receiving for information is just the direction. Whether or not it fails, it's still a receipt for information.
To do that vote again.
But we didn't even need to call a vote then.
Right? Do we?
I guess.
No, you don't.
Right? Okay, the clerk says that's fine. If you want it. Okay. Discussion reports. PWCS 2021-101 hot water tank replacement Jack White Arena. Mover Councillor Senton, seconder Councillor Hanley. And I'll turn this over to Jeff Holman.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that council approve an adjustment to the budget with funding in the amount of $15,263.75, HST excluded, funded from the arena reserves for the replacement of a hot water tank. And two, that council approve an adjustment to the budget with funding in the amount of $1,684, HST excluded, funded from the arena reserves for the repair to the hot water tank recirculating line. And three, that the repair and replacement be awarded to our maintenance service provider, Complete Comfort Niagara, Inc.
Okay, and go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that this was brought up, and I agree with changing the tank. But I believe that we need to be discussing this James White Arena and what we're going to do with it. And these costs are going to come along, and I'm hoping that when these costs are coming up, that you really take a look at it, because this is an old arena and it's supposed to be decommissioned, as far as I know, since we're putting in a new arena. And so I want to make sure that this gets dealt with sooner than later, and not even with the budget process, because I think this has to be looked at. I have mentioned different projects that could be done there, and maybe included in a project could be a museum on that land. But that's just a comment. So I agree with what we're doing tonight, but I want to make sure that staff takes a look at it and brings back a motion to look at what we're going to do with that land.
Jeff, do you want to comment on that?
I've got the message very loud and clear. Yes, we absolutely need to look at that, and perhaps we can capture some of that in our space needs study.
Okay, Councillor Neal, do you have any further? Councillor Longo had his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the timing, I guess, is kind of coincidental. So staff does not have to answer any questions. I'll just make a comment, because I'm going to turn this into a comment on a Canada Games facility. This council's committed a tremendous amount of money for a new twin pad arena, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got a customer who's concerned about the lack of hot water in a James White Arena, which is basically condemned. We're going to spend $15,000 to put hot water in there for how long? The new place opens January 25th, I'm told. So why wouldn't this customer be redirected up to the new place, and why don't we just shut this place down? Like, this is asinine. We've got, like Councillor Neal said, we have a community group, volunteers from the museum come to us begging, and we're going to throw 15 grand away on a old dilapidated building because a customer, okay, and I'm not sure who the customer is, and I won't even guess who it is, but that customer will be able to go up the hill to 2 new state-of-the-art brand new arenas and rent those. So this is ridiculous, in my opinion. I will not support this. We do not need to put another nickel into that building. What we need to do is put the boards up on it, and I mean on the windows and doors, on January 25th, I think the date is. Because we need to figure out how we're going to utilize the Canada Games facility to the greatest extent to pay bills, because it's a costly building and we need to get away from this old building. It's not worth it. So I will vote against this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeff, did you want to comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, I don't want Mr. Holman to comment on that, because I made references to the Canada Summer Games, and that would be inappropriate.
No, I'm talking about the hot water tank. I'm talking about the hot.
Comment.
I'm talking about the hot water tank, Councillor Longo.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want any comments made after what I said because I spoke about the Canada Games facility. If you'd like to comment after somebody else speaks, please do that, but not after I speak because I don't want it to come across that I was saying something demeaning to staff.
Okay, Councillor Longo, we heard you. Thank you. Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Holman. Can we get by without a hot water tank? What is the situation there? Is it warm water? Is there a health and safety aspect to this? You know, with everything opening up, coming up, I generally, you know, support it, but can we get by without this? Or is there something health and safety or something is there a reason we have to do this?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask the Manager of Community Services to respond to that question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we haven't determined what the facility will ultimately be used for. So we still do have dry floor rentals that are inquiring. Yes, the hot water tank is failing. It hasn't totally failed, but the water is, let's say, lukewarm at best. It does cause some cleanliness issues. Again, it's difficult to clean without hot water, but you can get hot water from other areas in the building. But again, having a shower in a cool to lukewarm shower after a hockey game, it can be tough. So
I did it for many years, so I would suggest that, like Councillor Longo said, maybe we get by with what we have for now, and see if it goes completely gold. But I've done it before, and if you don't get in the first three anyways, you're usually out of luck. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Kenny.
Well, I can say I've had a shower in those showers this year, and it's not a problem of being lukewarm. Sometimes it's scalding hot and it burns the skin off your body. So we either have to fix it or shut them, because it's not just sometimes warm water, it's scalding, boiling hot water or ice cold water. So the decision is one, either shut them or repair it. There's no leaving the water on, because somebody's going to get hurt.
You want to comment, Curtis? Is that to do with the circulation? I don't know. I'm asking.
yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be correct. So that's the recirculating line that's also priced out in this report to replace. That's essentially what the issue is as well.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yeah,
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
No, go ahead, Councillor Neal, and then I'll get Councillor. Don't worry. Everybody will get a chance to speak.
I think we have to deal with this sooner than later. And if we could make a motion tonight, I would, but I'll bring it up for the next meeting, that we deal with this particular building. I like Councillor Longo's idea of putting some boards up and shutting it down January 25th. And I think we should have been dealing with this prior to tonight. And that's the one thing I'm disappointed in, because I have brought this up before, what I feel that the building should be, and we need to discuss this.
So do you want, what do you want out of that? Do you want a staff report back on that issue relating?
Yeah, but we're dealing with the
hot water tank at the present moment. Okay, you're right. Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree 100% with Councillor Longo. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Councillor Sentence, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So Curtis, can we just fix that line and have the recirculation? Like, can we spend the 1684 and get by and not burn anybody or freeze?
So through the mayor to the councillor, yes. So essentially what's happening is the hot water tank is failing, so it won't reheat quickly enough. So what happens is after the first couple showers, as mentioned, the recirculating line will scold you, and then essentially get cold showers, and the tank just can't keep up with the demand. That's essentially what's happening.
So can we fix that line and be good to go and hope?
Through the mayor, we could fix the line. It will help with the scolding issue. However, it won't help beyond the first shower or two, but yes.
That would be my suggestion, the 1684, but I'll leave it to everybody else too. Thank you.
Is this the same type of equipment we have in the new rink, what I call the new rink, the Doherty Arena?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be a similar system setup, yes, where you have a hot water tank and a recirculating line that pushes the water through, yes.
So could that, say we close the arena down, could that tank be repurposed in that arena is my question.
So the tank that we're, sorry, through the mayor, the tank that we're speaking of is in the white arena, so
I know,
that's
but
the arena that,
no, I'm saying that once that arena's closed down, if you put a new hot water tank, is that reusable in the Doherty Arena? That's my question.
through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be repurposable for that arena or other facilities, potentially, yes.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? So, go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the appropriate staff member, I'm just wondering if it makes sense for us to move this report to our next council meeting and ask staff for a report. Maybe they already have it partially put together. I'm not sure of what to do with this arena before we start putting more money into it. And my second comment is, do we actually have to provide showers? So we could close off the showers, but still have facilities for people to wash hands. That could be a secondary option.
Does anyone
So
want
two questions. To staff, does it make sense for us to defer this until the next meeting so that they can come back with a report of potential uses of the building? And the second is, do we actually have to supply showers in those facilities? A requirement.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we can bring back answers to both of those questions. I'm not sure we know them today.
So can we refer the report to the next meeting? Is that what you'd like to do? Let Councillor Hanley speak first. Go ahead.
I want to defer the report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we refer the report to come back next meeting with more information. Is everybody good with that? So I need a mover and a seconder on that. Councillor Hanley and Councillor Wilson. Is that good? Because we're referring it, we're not deferring it. We're referring it to the next.
Referring it to the next meeting.
Referring it back to staff.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. PDS 2021-52 revision of zoning bylaw amendment 1149 Cottameyer Road Towpath Estates subdivision. I have a mover, Councillor Wilson. Is Councillor Decker still on? So I'll get a seconder, Councillor Sentence. And I'll turn this over to Senior Planner Paul Clausen.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations of this report is that the Planning and Development Services Report PDS 2021-52 be received. That council directs staff to prepare a new bylaw to repeal and replace bylaw number 2021-110 in order to remove the natural heritage feature buffer area zone from parts 1 to 6 and 10 to 12 of the subject lands in accordance with figure 1 of this report, and that no further notice be required for minor changes made to the proposed bylaw after the public meeting was held in accordance with section 3417 of the Planning Act.
Okay, and is there any questions on this report? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Klassen. Mr. Klassen, this is just a typographical error. Is that what it is?
Through the mayor, that's correct. The buffer area that was accidentally left on some of the area to be developed is just being, basically the parts on that schedule in the report are being shifted around so that it makes sense. portions of that buffer that's meant to trigger an EIS were accidentally left on parts of the development where an EIS had already been completed, and basically the conclusions of which were that there would be no impact subject to mitigation measures. So it's a typographical error.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. PDS 2021-56, request for council resolution to allow for minor variance applications. Topaz Estate subdivision, mover Councillor Longo, seconder Councillor DeRose, and I have Denise Landry, manager planning up. Go ahead, Denise. You're muted.
Thank you. The recommendations of the report are that the Planning and Development Services Report PDS 2021-56 be received, and that council permits the owners to apply for minor variance applications for Towpath Estate subdivision as per section 45, subsection 1.4 of the Planning Act. And this concludes the report.
And I'll open it up for questions. Are there any questions regarding this? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager of planning. This is, again, has to do with our changed comprehensive zoning bylaws. Is that the reason behind this?
Through the mayor to the councillor, no. So this was the application for plan of subdivision that was brought at the last council meeting. And staff, as well as the applicant, there was an oversight, there was a miss on a setback that wasn't included in the bylaw. So the best course of action at this point would be to go for a minor variance. So it was an oversight as part of the bylaw and as part of the process.
Okay, so again, I like asking questions because I like to learn on this. So why did this not go to the Committee of Adjustment?
Oh, so this, through the mayor to the councillor, this application was a full zoning bylaw amendment application that was part of the subdivision. So they had applied for the zoning, and as part of the zoning, they included site-specific changes. So one site-specific change was missed as part of the review process. Okay, so it was not enough just to be a minor variance. It was a whole zoning change.
Okay, so what was the one site-specific change?
There was an exterior side yard setback that was missed for 2 blocks. In the report, you can see the little blocks that are filled in. Yeah. The lots on the end that are adjacent to towpath, a reduction to the exterior side yard setback for those blocks was missed.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. PD, is that, that's it, right? Yeah? Okay. Notices of motion. Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I thought we were going into closed meeting, and I just wanted
it's coming
to let
up.
the
It's
clerk
coming
know
up.
that I still can't get into. Sorry, but when we do, I can't get into the city website, so she's going to have to, or the city email, so she's going to have to send us a link. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry. Thank you. I thought we were done. Sorry.
No. We got to go next to bylaws. First reading of bylaws. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kenny, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws. Bylaw 118-2021, 119-2021, 120-2021, 121-2021, 122-2021, 123-2021, and the same now be read a first time. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Second reading of the final reading of the bylaws, moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kenny, that the bylaws just read a first time be read a second and third time and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same, any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now we're going to move into closed session, and Councillor DeRose may need some help. You've been sent that link, Councillor DeRose, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Closed meeting. I have a mover, Councillor DeRose, seconded by Councillor Wilson, that council move into closed session at 8:59 p.m. to discuss employee and labor negotiations, IAFF fire negotiations update, and personnel matters about identifiable individuals, COVID-19 vaccinations update. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now we'll move into your closed session link, and we'll see